Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is a young man named Ivan, who I met in London a month ago or so. And he was introduced to me by my friend John Granholm, and we had lunch together, John and Ivan and myself. And then John left to go to a meeting with someone else, and Ivan and I walked around for a while, and then several days later, we met back up and we toured the Constable Turner exhibit at the Tate Britain Museum together. We walked through there, and then we talked for a while. And he's a young man with a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of impressions about the world that I think you'll find interesting and worth listening to. So I'm glad to have Ivan with me today, and I thank you for watching.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ivan. I'm 24, from London, which I make a point of telling people about. Uh, I'm interested in lots of different things. I'm very, very interested in generally media in all its forms. It's often difficult to discern, I think. There are some things I think I'm interested in. Like, I would say I'm interested in politics, but I'm sort of interested in politics primarily because I feel I have to be interested in politics. I wouldn't say it's an interest that's like a joyous one. I love sort of mythology, mythography, folklore and stories in all its forms. Um, I'm very interested in uh, sorry, not having the best night's sleep. I'm very interested in also a lot of natural science, a lot of animals, insects. Recently, I've been very into snails. Tend to have sort of things I'm very interested in for short periods of time. I'm interested in majorly in history, specifically medieval and ancient history. Um, Modern history is interesting as well. It's just less so to me. Um, but yeah, sort of a weird. It's an odd thing, isn't it? You feel a bit on the spot, being like, "What am I interested in?" I feel like I never really think about what I'm interested in. It just kind of comes up, and I'm trying to think about what
Yeah.
comes up. Very interested in etymology in words, how words come to be, language. Um, yeah.
So you
As I
have
say, it's sort of
you have a wide
so
spectrum
as I
of
was saying,
interests.
yeah, I would say, and this is definitely something a sort of belief I've espoused before. I think breadth is very important to me. Um, Even within, I mentioned I'm interested in
What do you mean by
literature,
that? What do you mean by breadth?
um, like a broad input of. Like as I say, I'm interested in media in all its forms, and but if I was just to take literature, like I think it's important to read from a variety of different cultures and um different cultures, different experiences, because otherwise, what's really the point? Um,
Do you have a
I
favorite?
think
Do you have a favorite type of media?
um I think my favorite would probably be books. It's books or music, and I'd probably lean towards books, even though I'm very fanatically interested. Or films. I'd say, as someone who wants to be a writer, books are probably the one I revere the most. So I would describe it as my favorite. I'm blown away by great filmmakers and great musicians, but books are probably the one that I can connect to the artistry in the most.
So give us
I sort of hear someone doing something brilliant on a keyboard, for example, and I go, "That's incredible. That person's amazing." Whereas if I read a brilliant book, I more have a feeling of like this is what I wish I could do. So I'd say books are my favorite.
What is something you've read recently that you really liked?
The Beast Slinks Towards Beijing.
I have not heard about that. Tell me about that.
It's really good. I wouldn't want to. It feels like a story which I describe too deeply. I'll kind of spoil a good chunk of it. It's a really, really beautifully like the prose is fantastic. It's written really well. It's a book about a the sort of premise of the novel is it's a book about a second generation Chinese American immigrant, and she's got this sort of quite high powered job in New York, and she's sort of been uh essentially she sort of has pushed past being abandoned by her father. And at the start of the novel, her father, an alcoholic now, just appears in front of their old childhood home that she
Huh.
sublets to I think a sorority. And so the beginning of the book is dealing with that kind of sudden intrusion. And then mixed in with that, there's a lot of beats of sort of generational trauma, especially from father. The reason I was drawn to the book is it's got a lot of sort of supernatural elements, a lot of kind of it's hard to describe this without kind of revealing too much. Um, it's got a lot of sort of as I say, supernatural and horror elements. Um, while at its core still being very much a book about people, which I think is really, really necessary when you write, especially sort of low fantasy and urban fantasy. I think it's if it's just about the monsters, it's like, well, you know, I'm not that bothered by this.
So
Whereas this, it very much feels like very real characters in this very surreal experience.
so it's sort of mixing genres there.
Yeah, somewhat. I
Kind of a
think,
monster horror genre with a um, human family experience genre. Is, am I
yeah, I mean, I would
overstating?
say that at least, I don't know, relatively recently, I sort of, for about 4 months ago, I was really sort of intensely reading a lot of classic literature, some I'd read before, some I hadn't, sort of burying my head in the sand a bit and being like, the era of great authors is dead. And so since then, I've been very committed to picking up more contemporary literature. And I would say that generally, I think that literary fiction now uh, cares a lot less for genre than I think it has at certain times in the past.
Hmm.
Um,
I agree.
this is just my personal experience, and people can disagree, but I think now now there is sort of one either writes literary fiction, you write the story you want to tell, regardless of what it is, and what quote unquote genres it would fit into, because the audience searching for it will not really care whether it's a what genre it is. And if you're writing genre fiction, you write very much within the conventions of said genre. I think you take figures like, say, the obvious example right now would be Brandon Sanderson for fantasy, who writes, essentially very churns out literature, and writes very sort of just solid, fun fantasy. It's not for me, but
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but
I think that's kind of the epitome of like now it seems, yeah, either an author is attempting to write literary fiction and that's the genre, so to speak. Like
yeah.
the other sort of subgenres are irrelevant, or they're writing within a genre for fans of that genre. Um, and it's sort of denucleated in that way.
Um, yeah, I'm writing a novel and I'm blending two genres. I'm blending a political thriller type of genre with a family drama. And and it's and for my first time out, it's probably not a very wise thing to do, but I'm figuring out how to make it work, and
Yeah.
it's and if no one ever reads it, I will have had the time of my life writing it.
It's an interesting one, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever thought about writing?
yes. Yeah, yeah. It's um it's the primary dream of my life, I would say, is to be an author. And I don't know, I spent a really long time convinced that I had to write the next Brothers Karamazov, or It's All Worthless.
That's a heavy
And I
burden.
think recently I've come to accept that there is a reason that most great works are not released by a 24-year-old. I think there is a long process of getting to know who I am and what my voice looks like before I'm really truly capable of putting the work that I believe I'm capable of and want to be capable of out. But that doesn't, I mean, it's not like a cop out. I'm trying to write as much as possible now. I do open mics for poetry as much as I'm able. I'm trying to do more of that. And recently, a friend told me about a sort of sci-fi competition, and sci-fi isn't really necessarily inherently what draws me, but it's a sci-fi fantasy competition. It's a short story thing, and I don't know. I had this idea pretty instantly about doing a sort of modern Baba Yaga story, that kind of instantly came. So that's what I'm kind of working on right now. But I'm trying not to. Every bone in my body, uh, especially since I went sober, has been begging me to start writing a novel. And every neuron in my brain knows that I do not have the discipline or energy to actually do it. So
Why don't you
it,
start by writing a short story?
well, that's what I'm saying. I'm just kind of writing. I'm writing smaller and more personal things for fun before I embark on like
Yeah.
a
Oh,
bigger
well,
project, because I'm just not.
I,
I'm not there right now, and I think that's always the big kind of that's always the big dichotomy. You know what it is you want to do, but the rational part of you is like, well, you know that you're not able to do it justice right now. So I'm just kind of noting down ideas for future reference, but I'm not I'm not too concerned right now with the idea of writing a novel, although it
well,
is something I will absolutely aim to do in my life.
when I published my first book, it took almost 3 years to produce it. And we'd go out and do book events, book signings, go to a bookstore and sit there and for 2 or 3 hours. And people came up
Hello?
with me all the time and said, well, I'd like to write a book. I'd love to write a book. You know, and, uh, for them, they thought that the writing the book was the goal. And I said, that's don't write a book. Just write. Figure out what goes on in your mind and your heart. Just begin to articulate the things that you see. And if there's a book there, it will show up. But if there's no book there, you'll know. And you will not have to have carried this burden of, well, I have to write the book. I have to be the next Dostoevsky, or I have to be the next Kurt Vonnegut, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
It's pressure that doesn't help the writer.
no, it's all sort of put on by yourself. And I would also say, I don't know, I think there's this I I don't know, I am under the opinion that there is a fundamental necessity as an artist to have the ego to believe that you can do it. Um, I've I've never had the thought process of I'd love to write the book, but um, my thought process has always been, when you write the book, what if it's terrible? And that's what sort of kept me uh, going. Well, I mean, also I
Who,
was just
who
not doing anything.
determines who determines whether it's terrible?
Oh, it was completely delusional, and you know,
Well,
it's
that's my
as I've
point.
sort of spoken, as we've spoken about before, you know, I was basically just drunk the entire time, and looking for reasons to not do anything. But you know, fundamentally, yeah, I mean, I think there's no part of me that thinks I won't write a book. I'm just aware that it has to be tabled right now. uh I'm not sort of in this I'm not in a kind of limbo of like, oh, but will I, won't I? I'm like, I will do this. Because I think if I don't, I'll be miserable. I'll be really
Well,
unhappy.
let me offer this thought to you that when you're not writing, everything else is research.
Yeah, I mean that's the as I kind of said earlier, that's the kind of mindset I have right now, which, you know, inherently, as I say, there is a reason that people of my age tend not to publish bestsellers, and one of the main reasons for that is, at the end of the day, uh, or not even bestsellers, but tend not to publish things of great kind of, I think, weight or insight, because you've had less time as a functioning adult to research, essentially. You know, you're going in with a very shallow, um, I think, understanding of the world around you at 24. I like to think I'm an insightful person, but I mean, realistically, you know, there's
Well,
plenty of things.
I think it's unfair to you. I think that's the lie that older generations place on younger generations, that you don't have anything to say, you haven't lived long enough, you haven't suffered enough. That's just not
I don't
true.
think it's that I don't think it's that I don't have anything to say. I think it's that knowing who you are is something that happens over time, and I think intrinsic to good literature to some degree. Um, I don't think it's an issue. I mean, if I wanted to, I mean, like, let's be clear. On the flip side, there's lots of authors in their 40s and 50s who are frankly awful. I don't think
Yeah,
age defines whether one is good at writing.
my point.
I think
Yeah, yeah.
not at all. What I think changes is the voice in which one is writing in. And I think that, you know, a nice analogy might be that I think as you sort of as the sort of older you get and the more cognizant of who you become, you are able to tune out. You know, if you sort of think of it like being in a so having trying to have a conversation in a very crowded, loud room, you know, and you're trying to hear the voice that is the novel, the thing that later becomes a novel, or the thing that later becomes a poem. And I think, you know, with short form things like poetry, it's very easy to clock into that a lot more quickly. But I think with these long things that require time and deliberation, you have to be tuning into that conversation, that voice more and more consistently. And I think it is a skill of practice, tuning out everything else and keying into that. And
Mhm.
that's what I think requires age. I don't think it's a thing
But
of
you already see that.
sufferance.
You already see that.
Yeah, but I also am I'm also aware though that I'm not particularly good at it yet.
Well,
You know, I'm it's a
yeah.
learning curve.
I'm just saying that we place a lot of burdens on on ourselves to be perfect or to be better than what we should be, and instead of just saying, okay, this is where I am, I'm just going to produce what I can, and if it's great, it's great. If it's not, it's not.
Yeah,
But I think we place a huge burden that we have some.
that bit I do struggle. That bit I do struggle with.
Well, I think we all, well, I had a guest on here a couple of years ago, and First thing she came on, she says, "You wouldn't believe what I heard." I mean, and I've known this woman for a long time. She says, "You wouldn't believe what I heard this morning." I said, "What did you hear?" She says, "I heard this woman talking about imposter syndrome. You know what imposter syndrome is, don't you? You know what that is?"
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. This woman said,
Yes.
if you are not
Intimately,
suffering
I would
from
say.
imposter syndrome, you're not trying hard enough. Meaning you're not extending yourself. You're not trying to be better than what you are. Because, and I thought that's a really interesting way of looking at that. Am I
Yeah. I mean, I think it sounds I also think it sounds mental, but I think I don't know, sometimes there comes sorry, I'm just gonna close my window because there's a school outside.
sure?
All right.
Uh,
Um uh,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, I think I don't know, I think to some degree you can lock yourself in this like I think sometimes for certain people in certain places like it's a little bit okay to rest on your laurels. I don't necessarily think. I think if you have achieved a major thing you've set out to do, it's okay to be like, yeah, I'm good enough and I did this, and I frankly don't need to do much more. Like, I think, I don't know. No, it seems, you talk about, you mentioned earlier, like, we put all this burden on ourselves to be perfect, and it's like, that just feels like another extension of it. Like, you
Yeah,
have to be trying for something bigger and better all the time, when realistically, it might not be out there. Um,
I agree.
what like that feels like a sort of a mindset totally geared towards a sort of Alexander Wept moment, uh, where you sort of eventually, either you fail along the wayside, and you're miserable, or you finally keep, you through trying and trying and extending yourself, you reach a plateau where in this field where you have extended yourself, you have reached, you know, some sort of summit to some degree. Um, and obviously it's different things. Like I see the value of that to some degree more in like creative industries, but like, if you're if you're like a lawyer and like at a certain point, like you are able to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm a very good lawyer, right? I'm a very good doctor. Um, and I think it's weird to attempt to act as if security and knowledge in one's own competence is due to a lack of effort.
It's a very interesting thought. It's a very interesting thought.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a good conversation, Sparker. But like, if someone said that to me and seriously believed it, like, I don't know. I would also say, I guess, I think it feels too. Perhaps as a young man, it's also the fact that it feels a little too like close to the bone from all the like bullshit, red pill, manosphere nonsense where you always have to be striving for the next arbitrary goalpost. Um, yeah, I think it's a lot of these things are centered in this idea that, yeah, centered in this idea that like effort is an unlimited resource, which I don't necessarily think that it is. Um,
Yeah.
and indeed, I think that overextension when striving um, can be just as dangerous as underextension, just in totally different ways.
Yeah, I see that, and I've experienced that. I have a very odd question for you.
Yeah.
The the picture that's hanging over your head.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's Fela Kuti. It's a concert picture. It's a concert photo of Fela Kuti.
And when did that happen? I'm looking at the date.
Glastonbury, 1984.
Uh,
I bought it at the British
that's my
Library.
birthday. That's my birthday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, June
June
23,
23rd. Damn.
1984. And yeah, that's I rarely see my birthday, in print because it's a nondescript birthday. So that was a big concert in there, and that's a
I
big.
assume so. I obviously didn't
You weren't
attend.
around then, were you?
Yeah. I obviously wasn't one of the people there. No, I got it at the British Library. Um I was sort of me and my mum dragged me. They did this exhibition about Fela Kuti in mid 2010s. I want to say 2014, but I could not tell you accurately. And I just instantly fell in love. I think their music is just unbelievable. It feels so new even to this day. Um,
So he was an artist, right? Or was he a
yes.
musician?
Um, Musician, but it feels a little uh trite to say just that. He was a major sort of political figure, um, cultural figure, sort of the inventor of Afrobeat, but also kind of
Oh, okay.
uh promoted. Yeah, it went to America, brought a lot of the sort of sounds and fusions back, um, and just generally, was this very, very outspoken against the establishment. Um, just like a huge figure of cultural importance.
Well, I need to find out about him because it sounds very interesting. So,
Yeah, I mean, he's a very like the exhibition about his life was just fascinating. And I think it's rare.
was your mother a fan of him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think not as intensely as I am. It's tough. She used to listen to a lot more variety of things when I was younger. I think these days she generally mostly listens to classical music, um, and opera, and that's mostly it. But growing up, I was exposed to a very, very eclectic range of things. I could be listening to Deep Purple 1 second and then Greek folk music the next, and then
Wow.
Massive Attack or Henry Rollins. Um,
But that's quite
and
a diverse
yeah, I mean,
list.
it comes back to that. It comes back to that idea of breadth, right? Um, like I think it's I like having things where I'm very, very knowledgeable about. But if I'm perfectly honest, I feel comfort in being a person who has like an okay amount of knowledge about lots of different things. Um, I think I don't know. I think it's a very growing up, it was really nailed in me, that the various sort of cultural. I think there's something about coming from a sort of smaller country, like Sweden. I think there's. And I have a friend who says, who spoke to me and said that they feel very similarly about their home country. France does the UK about this, where I think if you're from a country with a major language, with a sort of major global language, um, it becomes very easy to just bother about the things that are English, right? Or the things that are in English or the things that are in French. Um, and I don't know. I mean, in Sweden, we have a very rich cultural history, but it's not nearly as extensive as, say, writings in the English language. You sort of end up, it ends up being more important. It ends up being just as important to just experience the sort of general European cultural touchstones. It was, and my mum raised me like with that being very paramount. I not like she ever never forced me to read or watch anything, but it would be sort of conversations like I remember being sort of like maybe 10 years old and mum putting on Seven Samurai and being like, you just have to watch this. Like this is an important thing to have seen.
Yeah.
Um, and in general, I think that's an idea that like the idea of, when I would always ask why, it's always like, well, you just have to have, or it's the idea of being a well-rounded person. Um, and I think for me, a lot of it comes back to that idea of like, if I want to feel, and part of it is I just get bored. Absolutely, I just get bored. But I think to me, it's paramount to being a well-rounded individual to have breadth more so than depth. I mean, there's absolutely, for example, there's for sure like there's for sure like some white supremacist out there who I would not describe as a well-rounded individual, who has perhaps some of the most extensive knowledge I've ever heard about World War II, right? Um, depth is, I think, a pursuit of personal interest. Whereas I don't know, I find that breadth to me feels almost like a responsibility. Um, it's
Yeah. I totally agree with you.
and I enjoy engaging with it, but I do also note that like there's a good and to be I think also it's like sometimes like I think people hear this and they instantly assume this means I hate a lot of these more or less intellectual pursuits because it extends to sort of other things. I love video games and anime, and I'm sitting here right now looking at my extensive collection of Batman comic books. Um, like, but I think saying that there are things I do because I feel I should do them, culturally speaking, often translates when you say that in conversation to people thinking that you hate doing them, which isn't necessarily true. I mean, there are so many times I actually think a great example was when we went to the gallery the other day, when you and me went to see the sort of uh, um, Turner Constable
Yeah.
exhibition, and like I didn't really have any interest in the exhibition. I went because I felt, well, it's a free ticket, and I reckon I should go. Um, and I know I hate Constable, and I couldn't really remember what Turner's work looked like. And I ended up being very deeply enamored by a lot of Turner's paintings, I think
Yeah.
should doesn't mean have to. And a lot of the time, the reasons I feel I should do something is because there's probably something valuable to gain from it. Um, like it took me probably 3, 4 runs of attending the opera before something clicked. Now I really love it. Um,
You have a favorite opera?
yes. The opera where it all clicked, but also just one of my favorite plot-wise, Tales of Hoffman.
Hmm.
Um, my mum hates it. She views it as very disturbed, and it makes her very uncomfortable. I absolutely adore it. I think it's an absolutely brilliant story, and I think a really interesting way to frame an opera as well. Um, yeah, that or that. Pagliacci for obvious reasons, or probably
What is it that you like about opera?
Don Giovanni.
What is, I mean, I've tried to interview people from the opera world on the podcast here. So, because I'm interested in opera too. And my knowledge of it is thinner than air.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I will not sit here and pretend that I am a deeply
But you know what you
knowledgeable
like.
operatic scholar. I am. Yeah, I what I like about opera, um, not first and foremost, but I think it's one cannot talk about opera without, mentioning the fact, and I think even people who hate opera will accede to the fact that the people who do it are supremely talented. It is a ludicrous degree of training and ability to become an opera singer, and you know, to some degree, just dumb luck. You need to be born with a sufficient level of talent for it to even be possible. Um, and so seeing those people show that talent in the way they do, I think is beautiful to me. I think one thing, and I will say, I think this is perhaps why fall flat for me or fall more flat for me than others. Um, but I think it is that you have to key into it. And if you can't key into an opera, maybe it's not the right opera for you, but if you can't key into an opera, you're going to have a grim 3. Whenever I've been to an opera that La Boheme, I think is a good example. I did not enjoy La Boheme. And so that was a fucking lengthy evening. That was a long, brutal evening. So
And it's not that long
you
of
click into
opera
it.
either.
Huh?
It's not, and it's really not that, it's not one of the longer operas either, La
No,
Boheme.
no,
So
no. But the whole sort of going to the opera tends to be a whole sort of thing.
it's an event, isn't it?
Or dinner or matinee. But I think it's when you're able to key into an opera, when you're able to sort of, in the same way when a great film hooks you and you're kind of just like, you get that feeling where it's like you kind of notice that you're just a pair of eyes. Everything else goes away and it's just that. I think that it's perhaps the rawest in terms of a performance, I think there's something fascinating that this very you know you know what I would compare it to? My favorite form of theater, my favorite types of plays tend to be uh Greek theater when done faithfully. Um Primarily because I think there is something within that deep overexpression of emotion that connects more deeply than perhaps more subtle displays do. Um I think it's the real I've said before that I think it's one of the real tests of a stage actor, because it's very difficult to sell people genuinely on the idea that the minute you're sad, you are tearing your hair and beating your chest, and when you're angry, you are sort of incandescent with the fire of the gods. Uh, and of it are the most enchanting and connective performances, amongst the most enchanting and connective performances I've ever seen live. And I think opera does the same thing in a different way, in that the the great singers, and of course this is why like if you just don't care particularly about the themes or emotions present in a particular play, you don't connect with any of the characters in the opera, you're not gonna necessarily get much from it beyond just appreciation for their talent. But I think when you connect to an opera singer singing deeply, um yeah, it's that incredibly grandiose expression of anguish that somehow feels more real than uh anything realistic could be.
Yeah.
It kind
Oh,
of, by being so surreal and so overblown, it ends up letting you connect to a very sort of raw maelstrom of emotion from the performer.
was it your mother that was Swedish? Or is it
Yes,
your father? It's your mother, right?
other, yeah.
And did she indoctrinate you into Ingmar Bergman?
Not really, actually. We never. I think she felt that she'd sort of been there, done that. I don't know if we ever watched. We watched Fanny and Alexander. I think it's the only Ingmar Bergman film I've ever watched with my mum.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, it was mostly on my own back. Um, I do believe we have the same favorite, although it is my understanding that it is generally the most, generally not the biggest cultural icon. That's obviously the Seventh Seal, but amongst, like, in Sweden, it's very much considered like the classic Swedish choice, which is wild strawberries,
Yes.
or the straw
Yes.
or the wild strawberry patch in Swedish,
Yeah.
which I think speaks to a lot of very Scandinavian sensibilities.
Yeah. I like it. And I like
Mm.
Persona too,
Yeah, it's
because it's so strange.
mm. Yeah,
So,
Persona's brilliant. Yeah, it's a very odd movie. I think I've watched The Seventh Seal probably twice. And the second time I was 22. The first time I was about 14 and I hated it. And then I watched it again when I was a bit older and really enjoyed it. Um,
well,
Not as much as his other films. I think he's at his best when dealing
so let me,
with very
I'm,
real human people. Um,
I'm curious about something. And I have a feeling I know what you're going to
yeah.
say. What do you think of your generation, the Gen Z generation? What do you think? What's your opinion of
Um,
that, or of your generation, of people your age? And should we here? Let me give some more
I think
clarification.
it. Sorry, yeah.
Um, the people I know of your that's within your age group, I really like, and I'm hopeful because of the people like you that I've met, because I think you're thinking for yourselves.
I think how I feel about my generation changes a lot based on a given day. Um,
Hmm.
mm, I don't know. There's a lot of mixed arenas and areas. I think that, you know, how do I feel about my generation? You know, Oftentimes when it comes to talking politics, deeply angry, um, more than anything by the lack of people voting. Um, because I understand why not. It feels pointless, but um, I also think that's just not even just cowardice. I think it's a complete waste of of what is one's right. Um, and indeed, I think that it's the apathy that all the insanity right now is standing on. I think that I'm not sure that I think much of my generation because I'm not sure that there's much generationally to think. I think that even within my generation, even the difference of a couple of years, like 3, 4 years, so drastically changes the experience one grew up with.
Hmm.
Um, social media has advented so quickly in our lifetimes that, you know, I didn't really actually start using social media properly until I was maybe 16, 17. Um, like I had Facebook before that, and I think I had Snapchat to talk to friends, but I didn't really use it. Um, but there's people like 3 years younger than me who had it at 13 then, they from the very beginning. And I think that drastically changes one's teenage experience. Um, I think I feel that my generation, um, you say we think for ourselves. I think we're just as bad as that as every other previous generation has been. I think we're incredibly, I think we're a generation of extremes and even extremes within those extremes. For
Hmm.
example, I think when it comes to engaging with all the difficult shit going on in the world, which, has been going on my generation's entire lives.
Right.
Like I was born 2 months after 9/11, and I'd challenge anyone to tell me a 3-year time period that things have been pretty solid, globally speaking, since then. Um, you know, and it's tough because it's sort of, it isn't, but it also isn't a very, I'll get back to this in a second. Um, I think that we're prone to either, let's take politics, right? I think people either decide to care about politics and care too much, not in the sense that it really matters to them, but in the sense that like it's going to be their sole thing now, or the only thing they'll talk about, or they opt out, which is already just an extreme dichotomy.
Hmm.
Then within that bracket of the people who choose to engage with politics, I think most people just get pushed towards, thanks to social media, kind of engendering a world where opinions are where the prevalence of opinion is not based on how reasonable it is, it's based on how much traction it gets, and it can get traction by being good or bad. I think people in my age bracket are very, very prone to looking to extreme solutions. My age bracket is, I believe, the most likely to vote for the Green Party here in the UK, and it's also the second most likely after pensioners to vote for reform. Um, it's a really, I think we're a very impatient generation. Um, but I also think, you also have to feel about my generation, and it's sort of, I'm sort of describing it quite cynically, but I do wish to add as a disclaimer, like, I also don't really fucking believe in any of the generations that came before me. I
Yeah.
mean, I was 15 when Brexit happened, and I could tell it was a terrible idea at the time. I feel like anyone could have looked at that and told you it was a stupid plan. And that they were just promising nonsense to anyone who'd listen. And yet, right? And yet, um, politically, I think my entire life is a series of losing faith in the British electorate, regardless of what generation they're from, because uh, I think that your generation seems to matter a little less. I also think that there are definitely things in my generation I think are, as I say, it's these things of extreme solutions and extreme adherence to certain ideals. Um, you know, there are things that are more or less important, and it's not feasible to treat every left-wing issue as deserving of equal consideration when people are struggling to eat and live. Um,
You know something? When I was your age and younger, um, we had the same issues. Same issues were current. They have a little bit different flavor to them, but a lot of them are the same. And the question I have is about my generation is, well, what did we do about it? Why didn't we quote, fix the things that we saw needed to be fixed? What was it that kept us from succeeding at that? And
I mean,
I don't have an answer for that. Um,
but I think this is where, and I think this is quite a bleak worldview that I hold, but I think this is where, it's my belief that the answer to that is not the previous generations, but there are certain power structures in play that simply will inevitably um either crush any opposition or absorb well-meaning people into it.
yeah,
You know, I find consistently, and in British politics, it's far truer in general because it's a first past the post system. But I think a lot of people enter British politics with, I'm not going to say good intentions, but I'm going to say believing in certain things. Like they have ideals, and I think by the time they get to a point of potentially being an elected minister, potentially being in the cabinet, or they've just made so many compromises that compromise on what they believe in and just towed the party line to get there so many times that they don't really meaningfully stand for anything anymore.
you know,
They'll have their core issues, but at the end of the day, if it's we've sort of seen multiple times, if it's core issues versus getting elected, core issues don't matter. Um, I don't know, like you say, fix the things that need fixing. Like Peter Thiel released that fucking manifesto for Palantir a couple of days ago, and I'm sort of sitting here being, don't get me wrong, Peter Thiel is fucking nuts, but it is this thing of like this is a man with an unparalleled level of power globally. There's only maybe three, four people in the world that have a similar level of influence and reach, um, globally speaking. And I think, at least for my generation, it's very difficult to see how to fight the technocracy, which I do view as really the big threat, um, globally speaking. It's difficult to think about how to fight the technocracy when, in many senses, it feels they've already won. So many of these companies have such an access and indeed a necessity in our daily lives that, or even just a presence that, yeah, I don't know.
well, the thing I count on, this is going to sound very strange, is that in every system and with every person, there's always a level of incompetence that they will not allow themselves to consider. And so the failure is baked into the systems. And so whatever they promise is rarely fulfilled. And
Well, I think the problem is that they don't. I mean, what they promise is very tangible, and what they want is just more. Um,
yeah,
it's not, that, and perhaps there will come a point where, the Thiels and Musks of the world end up sort of like two balloons stuffed in a box until one or both of them burst, because they're sheer in their never-ending quest for more influence. I think what I think though is that's probably unlikely to happen in my lifetime, or at least by the time it does. Uh, yeah, I mean, one of the other huge problems is that, like, I would agree with you if so much of what these people are doing isn't automated. Um, mm,
so what do you think of
it's
AI?
difficult to see where the income,
Do you have an opinion about AI?
like, I have some, you know. I think my core opinion is, that it's here. Um, there is no like with the internet, like with social media, there was no putting that genie back in the bottle, and the people who call for it to be sort of banned and stamped out are delusional. It just won't
I agree with that.
happen. Um, how do I feel about it? Um, I don't really know. I don't use it. Something in me feels wrong for using it. Um,
Do you feel like it
I have
promotes
no,
do you feel like it promotes a loss of agency, your personal agency? It's you're giving over something which is
yeah. I
naturally
think what I
yours.
really think it does is, yeah, absolutely. But I don't think that's I listen, I think lots of people are very up in arms about the AI art debate and the AI the AI sort of debate there, and I think it's a salient debate to have.
Yeah,
Um I also think fundamentally disagree with too many people on both sides. No, I do not think that prompting your AI to make work requires a similar, like, should be viewed in the same light as painting something. On the flip side, I don't think it makes you evil or a thief unless you're
right.
literally stealing images. And I think that also like it's gonna happen. If someone wants to sell posters of AI art, I think it's the responsibility of the consumer to figure out whether they care about that or not. I also think high literature will remain relatively untouched, despite what people claim. I think, yes, there's definitely concerns. I think placeholder jobs for creatives, things like graphic design, things like small commission writing things, will probably just get subsumed by AI. But people said Kindles would kill readings, and they did quite the opposite. I think that art as a whole, um, will probably thrive in part due to people's making it a very personal point to not consume AI art and not create AI art. But I'm not that, honestly, as a writer, I have issues with it, but I'm also sort of not that. It's an issue I don't feel I can do anything about or think about. In a grander sense, though, what I feel AI does is, I think it fucking just completely removes people's abilities to loss of agency is perhaps the better word. It's like, I mean, it feels like, in a potential in for a technocratic world, AI really feels like it's fattening us up as lambs to the slaughter. The amount of people I know who will Google something and just read the AI summary now is like, that's just inherently wrong to me. And every now and then I catch myself about to do it and I force myself to sort of scroll down and actually click things because I think it's really, really dangerous. Not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but AI absolutely gets things wrong. Um, More importantly, I feel I have noticed more sympathy towards certain mindsets and things when I've seen what the AI has to say about them. And in general, I'm just very concerned about, I think it's wishful thinking to believe that a lot of these people don't have a vested interest in your AI being slightly more amenable to like what boils down to data theft and things like that. Um and I think
I agree.
really, yeah, really my problem with AI is I think it's just absolutely I think it's atrophying people's minds. Um and to be clear, there are absolutely intelligent people who use AI as a tool, which it is, and it's a brilliant tool. A friend of mine uh did computer science and quantum computing. And both him and frankly everyone I know who's described computer science has told me that there's an astonishing number of people on their course who don't fully know how to code, thanks to AI. Um, it's brilliant at doing that part of it for you. The friend I'm talking about here set themselves a hard limit of only using it when it's sort of just repetitive coding that just needs to be done. And if it's something he needs to work out, he'll do it himself. Because AI is just brilliant at those things. You find people are using it to write essays, and I don't know, it's this thing of missing the entire point, right? Like
Well, my um
the essay itself.
my issue isn't in the writing. My issue is that none of these models incorporate the entirety of human knowledge. And in fact, there's a lot of what was created digitally that is no longer there. For example, I did a weblog for 20 years, over 20 years, called Leading Questions. It no longer exists on the internet.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to find out what I have thought over the last 30 years, you would not be able to find out that because a lot of what I wrote is no longer present. And that's my issue is that it's already decided what's important and what's not.
Well, I
And
think that's one of my problems is, of course, has it decided what's important and what's not, or
well,
has
well,
the
the
people made up
designers have decided that because
exactly?
the designers are the ones who connect it to the databases. I mean, I look at this as a consultant who's looked at all kinds of organizations and recognized how limited all these organizations were because they determined what the frame was that all their people could work within. When if they were smart, they would say, we want you to expand what you're capable of doing for the betterment of our company, the betterment of our customers, the betterment of the world. But that's not the way organizations have been designed over the last 50, 60, 70 years. I think the limitation is it's a very limited technology. That's the way I look at it. And that the only way to overcome the limitations is by human creativity.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I, I do agree with you, but I think really my core problems are with I think we we as a society are being sort of, not to, like, when people ask, sort of what's your doomsday scenario? Is it nuclear war? Is it plague? Like, mine is an AI doomsday scenario, but not in the sense of like an evil sort of am from how I have no mouth on my screen type scenario. Like, so just more like the thing at the end of Wall-E, where humans are just sort of fat, um, humans are sort of fat over consumerist,
Yeah.
uh, mindless sheep, and the computer doing as best it can to fulfill its objectives takes care of us and gives us what we want because
Yeah.
it doesn't have the capacity really to judge whether what we want is what we actually need. And I don't know, I think there's very scary, there's very worrying things for that kind of. You hear a lot of people that are very pro this type of technology talk about like, well, like it's human responsibility how they use it. And it's like, but humans aren't fucking responsible. We're like, that is an absolutely insane
Yeah.
thing to go like, well, yeah, like if yeah, sure, it's totally possible to absolutely use this for insane shit like undressing 14-year-olds on Twitter and generating child porn, but like it's not on us. It's them that's doing it. And it's like, well, yes, but like the gamut of human experiences runs from the demure to the
Yeah.
depraved, like for every for every person that and it's this worrying thing of like we're not I don't think we're long from the day where AI starts becoming a relatively, not in the way of like doing it for you, but a relatively reliable way to be someone's kind of mobile personal assistant, right? Your AI can keep track of your various appointments. You've got it on your wrist in your Fitbit. It can check your heart rate, your health levels, remind you if you're eating too unhealthy. And the question is really like, if you remove a setting that tells it to make you eat healthy, oh, you fit like it's this worrying thing of like, what does it look like? What does like it my concern is that AI will result in a kind of emotionless nanny doing its best for the human race. Um, and
Yeah.
that we will slowly revert to being more babied and more childlike and more dependent um, on the tendrils of the systems that exist. And I think,
Yeah. I see that.
more dependent on Amazon, things like that. Where we already are at a point where Amazon can track what I buy, um, analyze my spending habits, and suggest things for me
Oh, yeah. It happens to me all the time.
that they know I want at a time when I'm most likely to buy. Exactly, And one thing I've noticed is it will never promote me things in the morning, but it will often do in the evening, because they know what times I'm most likely to buy things more. And I
But,
think it's very
but,
concerning when AI gets involved with that, right? When we're
but,
at a point,
but you have a choice to ignore it.
well, I do and I don't.
I know, but that's your choice. That's your choice.
I mean,
You
to some
see,
degree,
that's what
like,
I think this comes back down to agency and choice that when we decide who we want to be, and we decide that that's not because someone has suggested to it or someone has seduced us into believing that. I think that that's when we make our own choices, we find ourselves in a position of strength that we wouldn't if we simply followed the kind of the expectations of the crowd.
I mean, I understand that, but my response is sort of right. But in what we're talking about here, the actions of the crowd matter as well, right? Like
Well,
if and I say when really governments start using AI in day-to-day governance, for example, right? Like, my face, Palantir has my face, right? The Online Safety Act, I've shown my ID to verify
yeah,
my
my
age,
face too. Yeah.
on like Reddit and social media and things like that, and so they have, yeah, they have my face, they have my data, they have all my passport information, and that belongs to someone who isn't that the person who has that isn't part of the UK government necessarily. We're living in a world where, and also to be clear, your points are valid and it matters for us. I don't think we're necessarily too far off the day when people are looking to AI to help them figure out how to vote, like who to vote for.
Oh,
And that
I,
to me is terrifying. And I don't feel that seems far away.
well, I think they've already been programmed to vote.
Perhaps not literally. Hmm?
They've already been programmed to vote a certain way. I think
No, but
that's
I
a
mean,
given.
I think more what I mean is like I think there's something very concerning when something is kind of not even necessarily important in one's daily life, but as vital as civic responsibility, like voting, becomes somewhat what's the word? Regardless of if it tells you to vote, tells you honestly who it thinks you should vote for or not, there's something very concerning about I think there's something very concerning about the level of offloading people are doing to AI. I mentioned an essay earlier, because it's a consistent problem that people are using AIs to just write their essays. Um, and people saying it's like I still gather the facts. I still gather the sources and gather the facts. Like, well, yes, but it's it's the construction of them in an argument that is the entire point of the exercise. And indeed how you get something out of it. And people often say like, oh, well, these people won't be rewarded in later life because they took the easy way out, that they used AI. But it's like, if everyone starts using AI, that's not going to be true anymore. You know, like we're in a transitionary period right now, but I think people, and this is why I don't like having the AI art conversation, because I think it's one that people really like having because it feels like one can be morally righteous on without. But the fact of the matter is, it's not the biggest issue. Um, the two biggest issues in my book are its use in politics. Just the sheer amount that has been able to be of propaganda that can be churned out by AI and false headlines is literally terrifying. And primarily, it's just how insidious it's becoming. I noticed my dad, a middle-aged, very intelligent man, whenever we're having a debate and it kind of reaches a stalemate, he'll just be like, well, let's ask chat GPT. And I'm sort of, it really gets me every time because it's sort of like, it's this handing off, right? I am of the belief that it is absolutely natural to not take the easy way out, but to alleviate like basic, if you find something that can alleviate basic chores, you take it, right? Like having a good sort of buy you want to buy like a better Hoover rather than having to hoover 3 times a week, you know? But yeah, there's a
Yeah.
level of just there's a level of offloading that not only do people do, but more importantly, and this is why I feel it's more insidious, seems to be encouraged by the people creating and producing these things. Um, that I find really quite what I feel that critical thinking is in a horrific decline. Um, and when people aren't even, I already think people are struggling to be bothered to think critically about things. It's easier to just
Well, Ivan, that's not new.
when
That's not new. It was true when I was growing up. I
no,
mean,
no, but
so
I think so. But I mean, this is the thing though, is that what I think AI ha does is it's in the same. I mean, listen, right? Like I think social media is a great example. Racist morons have always existed. They're just now able to be seen by thousands of people instead of your like friend down the pub. I said that exact sentiment on Saturday, which is the difference is that Joe at the pub can now be heard by 2 million people rather than the 10 people who look at him and sort of nod their heads, right?
well,
These people have always been around. These sentiments have always been around, but I think AI makes things easier to. The AI is AI is sinister to me because it's so insidious, um, and so tempting, I think. Um, would that none of us had to organize anything ever again. But what do we become if we don't? You know,
you
I,
see,
I, I feel
I'm I am not tempted at all by it because sure, I could prompt it and within 30 seconds I can have an answer to a research question, or I can spend the next 3 weeks scouring through my library looking for things and and finding things that AI would never find because all of a sudden I'm having a reaction to something I'm seeing that's asking another question. I still think that it's a limitation, it's a limited technology.
I agree, but I think we're talking about different things and don't get me wrong, I think the questions offloading is bad, but I think one, I'm not tempted by that, but I'm absolutely tempted by the idea that I could say, uh, hey, ChatGPT, I'm thinking of eating healthier this week. Can you knock me up a grocery list of what to buy from the supermarket? And it's all these really basic things that it can do really simply that I can I wouldn't use it. I don't want to use it. I don't really like it. And that's a personal thing. I don't begrudge people who necessarily do for those purposes. But I think that's what I'm concerned about. The ease at which you can slip into this
Oh yeah,
uh
but
the ease at which people have to stop thinking about the very mundane things that they're thinking about. And how much I don't believe the people that claim that this will give people more time to focus on their true passions. I mean, that's what people said in the Industrial Revolution, and they weren't correct. I
I agree.
think, and then the other concern, I think this does lean into the creative debate as well as, of course, like we are instituting it with absolutely zero care or safeguard for all the people whose jobs are being absolutely uprooted by AI.
And that's very true.
You know,
Ivan,
there's oh
I appreciate you being on here. I've enjoyed our conversation,
no, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
and
We'll have a fun chat, yeah.
we'll have to do this in person. And next time I'm in London, I'll let you know, and we'll do something different. We won't go to uh, a 19th century art exhibition. We'll go do something more contemporary or something. So, but thank you for being here, and
I mean, as I said, I really enjoyed it.
I know that I know I
All
did
right.
too, but I'd like to see some other things. If you
Yeah,
have
I mean, there's so
anything,
many things.
if you have anything you'd like to share with the public that I could put in the show notes, send that to me. And and we'll just see. I mean, if you
I
don't have anything,
honestly don't think I do really.
you want if
Not
you want people, well,
particularly.
let me put it this way. If you would like people to contact you, and I think that's a big question, then
Oh, right.
or if you have social media where you know, just send me
Yeah,
anything you feel
let
like.
me yeah, I will look at what would be the most appropriate avenue and I will
Okay. So thank
send
you for
you
being
that.
here, and thank you all for
And
watching. And we'll see you next
because
time
yeah.
here on the Eddie Network Podcast.